Armored cars and tanks and guns came to take away our sons, but every man must stand behind the men behind the wire. Armored cars and tanks and guns came to take away our sons, but every man must stand behind the men behind the wire. In the little streets of Belfast, in the dark and early morn, British soldiers came a-running, wrecking little homes with scorn. Hear the sobs of crying children, dragging fathers from their bed. Watch the scene as helpless mothers watch the blood fall from their head. Armored cars and tanks and guns came to take away our sons, but every man must stand behind the men behind the wire. Armored cars and tanks and guns came to take away our sons, but every man must stand behind the men behind the wire. Not for them a judge or jury, or indeed a crime at all. Being Irish means they're guilty, so we're guilty one and all. Round the world the truth will echo, Cromwell's men are here again. England's name again is sullied in the eyes of honest men. Armored cars and tanks and guns came to take away our sons, but every man must stand behind the men behind the wire. Armored cars and tanks and guns came to take away our sons, but every man must stand behind the men behind the wire. Proudly march behind our banner, proudly march behind our men. We will have them free to help us build a nation once again. On the people step together, proudly marching on your way. Never fear and never falter till the boys come home to stay. Armored cars and tanks and guns came to take away our sons, but every man must stand behind the men behind the wire. Armored cars and tanks and guns came to take away our sons, but every man must stand behind the men behind the wire. What's up, everybody? This is going to be a good one. No 20 minutes of Musk. I did the hipster thing and got ahead of the issue, and now it's all mainstream, so I'll just let it ride. You know, that St. Xavier Cabrini movie was really good. It tends to drag and tug a little on your heartstrings just a bit. It's a bit aggressive, but it's still very decent. However, Italians are not beating the rags to bitches allegations. Pardon my French. But for real, though, like, how do you go from having legitimately building it up from scratch and then becoming complete and utter tools? Like, legitimately, Italians are some of the worst tools in this country. They will do some of the worst things. That's where you get the Italian mafia. Like, Operation Gladio is one of the worst CIA operations of all time. People used communism as the ghost, fighting it in Italy, you know, because, like, a lot of places where communism popped up were, like, the lands of Slavs and the lands of Germans that had not built up inside of Christendom for a very long period of time. And so you don't see a whole lot of communism in England or Ireland. You don't see, except for James Connolly, you don't see a lot of communism in France outside of little tiny communes. And in Spain, you only see it out of certain autonomous communities rising up and then getting crushed immediately by the Phalangists. What you do see is a lot of Slavic culture, of post-shamanic steppe culture, combining around this ideology. So it never really was necessary in order to plunge Italy into a proxy war to do that. And the long-term consequences are, it's one of our most well-invested proxy wars of all time. And Italians have just ruined New York. Like, for real. Come on, guys. This is the reason why I criticize y'all. If there's any Italians listening to this, like, right now, come on now. Get it together, get it together, get it together, get it together. That crap that you're being taught is not adequate. You must study what Europe actually was great by. And it's not by destroying absolutely everything and turning it into a cesspit. One thing that Roman Catholicisms have to worry about is the very real threat of reverting back to paganism, where violence was the main currency. As someone who's studied paganism and Christianity up and down, it's the one thing that does seem worrisome. But the main proponents of this argument are usually Protestants, who they themselves are in great danger of moving so far forward that they just transform, they loop back, they horseshoe theory back into atheistic hedonists as if society had never built communal religious structures at all. And that is the great danger of Calvinism, is you still have this massive hierarchy of wealth, but there's no hierarchy of opportunity. And the morality is flattened out and deemed unnecessary because the people on the bottom are on the bottom because they deserve it. People are on top of it because they deserve it. That's actually kind of rare. Actually, most of the people on the top are there because of completely pragmatic, realistic reasons of their parents had money. People on the bottom are on the bottom because their parents didn't have money. It's very simple. And that's always how it's been. That says nothing about how hard you work. Some of the hardest working people in the entire world will tell you straight up, the system is not geared for, our system here in America is not geared for success and well-being and mental clarity and moral health. And it's a grab bag of immoral opportunity that throughout most of society would have been deemed unnecessary because of its payoffs in the long term. See, we came over here. This is a land of opportunity, they called it. And we had things like the gold rush, and we have things like Manifest Destiny. But ultimately, what a lot of America represents is a this isn't mine, so I'm going to do with it as I please mentality. The do what thou wilt mentality, and where like modern Satanism really came from in Benjamin Franklin and Antoine Louvet, which were French, but ultimately America and France after the Jacobin Revolution are one singular entity and would remain one singular entity in development until Napoleon took it back and then was exiled and killed. And then France continued to collapse farther. Louis XIV, the Sun King, was a very impressive individual, but his son, Louis XV, legalized prostitution. And by the time Louis XVI came along and reversed a lot of this, society had already degraded to such a horrific point. And back to the Italians, like, Vegas itself should never be put on a pedestal. And what do you see? You see a lot of Italians whose entire mission is get the bag, take it over to Vegas, dump it on the worst people in the world. And maybe one day you can work for the casinos breaking people's legs. Like, get out of here with that. I don't know what the hell it is with Italians and Israelis that causes them to lose all morality, but I can only assume it's the modern culture that has come to replace the venerable culture that once stood there. Straight up. There is no fire like passion. And what is a son without a mother? As well, what does a shadow stand for? Christ had the intellect of a Taoist sage. He was a great physician. He was a bodhisattva who was nailed to the tree. Like Odin, he gave his followers strength to speak. He came to heal the world. He did. We'll just have to honor his sacrifice, and you will see a tremendous amount of healing done in this modern world. There are so many people out there that work tirelessly for the betterment of mankind and to protect those that might never know their name. And then there's showboats and virtue signalers. Religion is not a fairy tale. Christ is the story of a real man who went through hell and became a real hero and a real inspiration, trying to orientate people towards God and goodness and decency and the long-term health and success of everything. Because there is a law. Because there is a right way and a wrong way of doing things. That means that there is a law shot through things. And to honor that is to honor the proper way of doing things. And to be short-term cash-out mind is to be the improper way of doing things. And to destroy your own posterity's chance of success. Some people think that the plants and animals drain the water like freshwater lakes were always there and are inherently finite resources. The opposite is true, actually. Trees store water deep underground in aquifers through their root systems, and that bubbles up from springs after being filtered through the ground. Cyanobacteria in the rivers and streams produce B12, and that grows our brains. Innocence may be lost, but understanding and wisdom is the key to balancing our fallen state, our falling nature, restoring the garden. But when fear is never transformed into love, we flee from such duty. I remember the feeling of seeing manatees for the first time, or looking into my puppy dog's eyes, or seeing love in a girl's eyes for the first time. I remember how it feels to have your heart do somersaults after dwelling in darkness prior. But frankly, the blind do love, and so must I. Oh, and I remember why Null said he rewrote the chat code. Apparently it became a security vector for cyber attacks. Maybe it did. And while we're on that topic, he was right about Musk. He called it earlier that a guy who does that to his children, which is to say he has like 11 children that he never sees, and it's come out repeatedly and even recently that he's not there when his children have medical emergencies. He's not there when his baby mamas request his attention. And to call yourself right-wing is to not have 10 baby mamas, like people who are both racist on the far right and in the center-right Christian will tell you. That's the case. But somewhere along the line, we have this aberrant libertarianism, which is not real libertarianism, but actually anarcho-capitalism. Anarcho-capitalism. Which is to say crony capitalism isn't good enough. You gotta, rip all the moral wiring out of the walls. And scrap that, too. That is the philosophy. So you'd say, super low aura, far right, which on the political graph with the green, blue, red, and yellow, it's actually a small purple corner where Jeffrey Epstein lives. That's where anarcho-capitalism leads you. And I'm not saying the Musk is a pedophile, but that is the philosophy, and those are the people who benefit off of that. And definitely don't trust USAID when they say, oh, we're using our resources to look into who the Jeffrey Epstein people are. It's not true. Not true at all. Basically, all of this is going to be accomplished by regular people doing very hard work and risking their biscuit in order to tell the truth. That's where it's gonna come from. That's its source. There was a Kiwi Farms user named Juthulu. He's in school for neuroscience. And he pretends to be an above-it-all intellectual. But he was barking like a feral dog about nuking the Middle East a year ago. It really goes to show you where the intellectuals draw their wellspring from. It isn't an enlightenment of mankind, it's a superiority of mankind, and you see this a lot with the Enlightenment itself. Whereas the Renaissance was actually more of an enlightenment of mankind. The Enlightenment was a suppression based on who could propagate their books and fool enough people into parroting it as possible, as quickly as possible. It's wild seeing how successful those 20v1 Jubilee surrounded videos are. I guess they cracked the political code. People just want to see bukkake politics. I'm sorry if you know what that means. Here's a deep cut. The media loves to find outliers and elevate them as examples of the right or the left. But it's actually rarer than you'd think that those people are all the way out there. The banality of evil is just that. Regular people just doing their jobs, and project heads divorced from the consequences on the ground. That's the driving focus behind a lot of this evil. People just doing their jobs. That's like 90% of the wars throughout history. People say it's religion. It's not. Religion accounts for about 10 to 12% of the wars throughout history, with Islam taking a slight lead over Christianity, but Christianity is still pretty far behind. still pretty close in reference to behind it. What would you rather have? Giant loud truck revving pitbull owning neighbor who drinks excessively, or electric vehicle owning all humans are equal sign in law and petitioning to start a HOA neighbor? Both use mega bright LEDs and everything. I don't know about you, but I'll take the worst of both worlds. Zionist Israeli flagged neighbor who loves Ukraine. Yeah! Musk is the penultimate paragon behind Obama of this neoliberal atheistic system. Trump, on the other hand, deeply flawed as he may be, second-term Trump is the most Christian president since Reagan. And you might say, Reagan? Nicaragua Contra Reagan? Banning guns in California Reagan? Yes, Reagan. H.W. Bush Vice President Reagan. You know, if you go back and you look, Carter tried to set our economy upright after the post-war bubble. It popped. It essentially didn't pop the way that like dot-com bubbles pop and stuff like that. 2008 financial crisis popped, housing market crisis. It actually started to wane. The post-prosperity bubble of the World War II time that was good for our personal economy in a few ways. But the Volcker shock from his financial advisor, who orchestrated our economy going into a planned recession, it scared people too much. But the Cold War was really hot wars across the world, you see. So the people who took it back out of fear and said, we're just going to party forever, those are the real monsters. H.W. Bush, Clinton, Obama, all Cold Warriors. H.W. Bush jacked off in Geronimo's skull, in the Skull and Bones communal coffin while his dad watched. Okay, so he's not an outlier there. Biden was legitimately brain dead. No matter what he said, no matter what he wanted internally or wanted 20 years prior, he was legitimately brain dead. An actual definition of a puppet. Like Reagan in his last part of his second term, level puppet. And Trump, after his assassination attempt, is a very good shot, and he does listen to people, and he is subject to change, and he is subject to like one person, and then a year later find out that they're not worthy of being liked and discard them. We don't need people who are loyal to people that aren't loyal to the United States to the bitter end. And rhetoric doesn't matter at all. What really does matter is especially telling the truth, but like, are you actually working hard to save the country? If you think you can cheat it with AI and you're hiring a bunch of insane drug-addled Zoomers and you yourself are taking drugs and barely sleeping and you're like partially hallucinating at any given time, it's kind of a stretch to trust you to save anything. I'd love to see it, but I haven't seen it. And trust me, I wish that it could have gone a different way. That's the way that it is. God has a plan. And don't get caught up in the Calvinist propaganda that tells the poor person that they're poor because God has a plan for them, and only they're poor because of God's plans. Don't get caught up in that, actually. God also had a plan for the person who gained the world and lost their soul. They just did it improperly. You must be in the world but not of the world, a shepherd and a soldier. And don't think that if you're not a holy person, that poverty is a venerable thing. Take it from me. You can have money, you cannot have money. Either way, it should not taint your judgment on things. Absolutely not. Sustainable income is income that doesn't allow you to compromise who you are, which means to grind you down to something that you're not. Take your beautiful potential and delete it for that income. That's not sustainable income. All right, Joe. This is a good little condensed episode. I think y'all liking. I like doing it. Hope everybody stays hydrated if you live down in the South. And yeah, cheers.